Our gospel reading for this morning comes from John's gospel. It is a small portion, a very small portion of the trial before Pilate. John's gospel, we'll get a hint of it here. John's gospel shows Jesus as in charge of the trial rather than Pilate. The Jewish leaders will not come inside because they are worried about defiling themselves for the upcoming Passover. In John's gospel, the Passover doesn't happen until Saturday rather than the Friday Passover in Mark, Luke, and Matthew. And so Pilate must scurry back and forth between Jesus, who's inside, and the Jewish leaders who are outside. And this running back and forth and sort of being battered around makes Pilate something of a tragic, even comic figure in John's gospel. And our reading for this morning happens when Pilate comes inside to speak with Jesus for the first time. Listen for what the Spirit may speak to us through these words. Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." The word of the Lord. Thank you, God. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice. That's how Jesus responds to Pilate's question about whether he is a king. But Pilate is not much interested in the truth. In the very next verse, Pilate responds, "What is truth?" I have a feeling Pilate would fit right into our world with alternative facts and truth isn't truth, as Rudy Giuliani famously claimed in an interview. Pilate's a politician, and politicians often have trouble and problems with the truth. It has a nasty habit of getting in the way of plans and agendas, and so truth is often a casualty of election campaigns and political debates. The Gospel of John, more so than any of the other Gospels, portrays Pilate in this business of truth as a tragic figure. As I mentioned, he must run back and forth between the leaders outside and Jesus, who is on the inside. Pilate thinks he has power, thinks he is in control, but it is an illusion. In our passage, Pilate has just come in to speak to Jesus for the first time after talking with the leaders outside. And he wants to know if Jesus is king of the Jews. But Jesus does not answer his question. Instead, Jesus questions Pilate, "Do you say this on your own, Or did others tell you about me? Pilate will not answer. But the question seems to have stung him. I am not a Jew, am I? He objects. Now, I need to pause here to clarify a bit about this word Jew. John's gospel is written by a Jew who follows Jesus. It is written to a congregation of Jews who follow Jesus and who worship at the synagogue. Most of the time in John's gospel, the word Jew does not refer to people who are Jewish. It refers rather to the Jewish leadership that opposes Jesus and the leadership that is threatening this congregation of Jesus followers who are Jews with being kicked out of their synagogue. And one of the great tragedies of history is that later Christians failed to realize this and then used the Gospel of John as a weapon against their Jewish neighbors. And so when Pilate insists that he is not a Jew, and in the Greek his question is not really a question, he is insisting that he is not one like those Jewish leaders who stands in the way of what God is doing, or as Jesus describes it, one who does not belong to the truth. And it's not that Pilate doesn't know what is true. He knows that Jesus is innocent, but there are other things that matter more to Pilate than the truth. Jerusalem is not exactly a prime posting for a Roman official, and Pilate would love to move up to someplace better. And so he no doubt wants things to go nice and smoothly while he is there. No riots during the Passover festival on his watch. And so if an innocent man needs to die in order to keep things calm, that is fine. Never mind the truth. Expediency often wins out over the truth. Saudi Arabian money and strategic assistance matter more than the horrific murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, or the torture of women's rights activists in Saudi jails. But this is not something new that began under the current president. Expediency and American foreign policy have gone hand in hand for decades. And what of me and you? Do we belong to the truth? I know that I am supposed to love my neighbors as myself, but I also live in a world that tries very hard to convince me of scarcity. There are many things and many experiences that I must have, and if I am truly generous with my neighbors in need, there may not be enough for me. The things that I want, fear that I'll miss out on something, these are the voices I'm prone to listen to over that of Jesus. I recently attended a week-long training seminar at my seminary, at Union Presbyterian Seminary in Richmond. And one of the evenings of the seminar, we did something they called Cinema Divina, where we watched a movie and then later would talk about, reflect upon the way it touched us and what it said to us. The movie was McFarland, USA, starring Kevin Costner. It's loosely based on the true story of Jim White and the cross-country team he coaches at McFarland High School in California. The team members were poor Latinos, most of whom worked as agricultural pickers. They would often go into the fields at sunrise and work until school started, and then return to the fields when school ended. And yet they somehow found time to be part of this cross-country team and to create the tradition of McFarland as a cross-country powerhouse. Now, two plots get interwoven as the movie moves towards its conclusion. One has to do with the state championship. Can this ragtag group of folks actually win the California State Championship in a sport that is dominated by rich white schools? And then the second plot has to do with Jim White himself. His surprising success at McFarland has gotten him noticed, and one of those rich white schools has made him a lucrative offer to become their coach. It would mean a lot more money and a lot more resources. It would mean a much nicer, more traditional suburban neighborhood for his girls to grow up in. It would be, in many ways, the fulfillment of the American dream. It would be the sensible thing to do, dare I say, the expedient thing to do. And yet I cannot imagine that anyone watching that movie is rooting for Jim White to take that new job. They would understand if he did. It would make sense if he did. But it would have been the wrong choice. A choice that did not belong to the truth. One of the wonderful things about movies and about literature and about the creation stories and other stories in the Bible is they're often able to draw us into the truth better than history or reporting or what actually happened. And watching McFarland USA, the real world, reality, gave way for a moment to the truth. People completely captive to the American consumerist rat race were rooting for Jim White to turn against it. And there were tears, relief, applause when he did. What is true for you? I'm not talking about facts or information or even perhaps belief. What do you belong to? What guides you? What do you give yourself to? What do you serve? There are many voices in our culture that seek to guide us, that demand that we listen to them and serve them and give to them. Some are loud and angry voices. Some are the seductive voices of consumerism. But Jesus says that to listen to his voice is to belong to the truth. It is in John's Gospel that Jesus says, I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. But the abundant life that Jesus offers is not the sort of abundant life that Madison Avenue promises or America First promises. It is a life guided by the truth. A life that Jim White discovers when he remains in McFarland. A life that volunteers tirelessly at welcome table, even if it sometimes means taking a little vacation time to do so. A life that gives itself generously, sacrificially to help others, even when that means denying oneself something deeply desired. A life that finds its true calling rather than simply the career that pays the most. A life that refuses to surrender to cynicism and continues to hope in and work for a new and better day. A true life. A truly abundant life. Jesus says, "For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." To whom do you belong? What voice do you listen to above all others? All praise and glory to the God who comes to us in Jesus and shows us the truth and the way. Thanks be to God.